Oklahoma City and the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area are less than 210 miles apart, yet one sits at the heart of America's fastest-growing population corridor, while the other struggles to gain momentum. As of 2025, Dallas-Fort Worth alone has nearly twice the population of the entire state of Oklahoma. The reasons span more than a century, covering history, geography, economic development, talent migration, and climate and cultural appeal. Together, they create one of the starkest population contrasts in the country. And when you look at today's numbers, the scale of that gap becomes even harder to ignore. The population gap in 2025. In 2025, population estimates show a striking difference. Oklahoma has roughly 4.08 million residents, while Texas stands at about 31.9 to 32 million. This gap is not just about scale, it reflects how each state's people are concentrated, how quickly their numbers have grown, and the sources of that growth. The Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex alone now has close to 8 million residents, approaching double Oklahoma's entire population, and it continues to expand at a pace the smaller state has never matched. Recent migration data helps explain that momentum. Texas consistently draws large inflows from other U.S. states and from abroad, with its biggest metros capturing the bulk of those arrivals. People moving from California, Florida, Illinois, New York, and overseas continue to settle in areas anchored by strong job markets: technology in Austin, energy and trade in Houston, corporate headquarters and logistics in Dallas, Fort Worth. These industries attract workers who often bring families, plant roots, and create sustained demand for housing and services. Meanwhile, Oklahoma's growth pattern has been narrower, with most new arrivals coming from neighboring states such as Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri, and parts of rural Texas. That's not to say Oklahoma hasn't seen notable inflows. After 2020, the state experienced historic domestic immigration, with tens of thousands of net arrivals in 2022 and 2023, an unusual bump highlighted by the Kansas City Federal Reserve. This surge helped nudge the population up from about 3.96 million in 2015 to roughly 4.08 million today. But because those inflows were smaller in scale and less geographically diverse than Texas's mix, their long-term impact on metropolitan growth has been more modest. Without large numbers of international migrants or high-wage corporate relocations to boost density and accelerate expansion, Oklahoma's cities gain population more slowly. The result is that, while both states have grown steadily, the balance shifts more dramatically over time. Texas's major metros are adding hundreds of thousands of residents every few years, compounding growth in ways Oklahoma simply cannot match with its current migration profile. The effect is visible in relative scale. What counts as a strong year for Oklahoma might be an average month for Dallas, Fort Worth. That difference in velocity compounds the initial gap from decades past, making each new year's comparison more lopsided. Oklahoma City and Tulsa, while successful at attracting some new businesses and residents, still expand at rates that trail Texas's urban areas. Oklahoma City is adding jobs and housing, and Tulsa's initiatives to bring in remote workers have drawn attention, yet the gains are incremental. By contrast, Texas's metros are positioned within expansive suburban networks that sustain momentum through multiple economic centers, each benefiting from the gravitational pull of the whole. Why that matters is straightforward. Larger and more diverse inflows don't just add people, they reshape economies. An influx from multiple regions and countries fosters varied industries, broader cultural amenities, and higher labor market resilience. These in turn make a city more competitive in attracting the next wave of migrants. Oklahoma's more localized inflows mean it shares a smaller and more competitive talent pool with several other nearby states. That reality limits its ability to generate the same self-reinforcing cycle of growth seen in Texas's largest metros. Even with positive numbers, Oklahoma remains on a different trajectory from its southern neighbor. Its two major cities are healthy by many measures, but they operate in a regional environment dominated by the economic and demographic weight of Texas. Over the past decade, Texas has not only maintained its lead, it has widened it by adding the equivalent of multiple Oklahoma-sized populations. Geography, industry mix, and the reach of migration networks all play into that widening gap. Looking at these numbers in isolation might make it seem as though this is simply a matter of current job markets or housing prices, but the roots of this disparity go deeper. The foundation for Texas's sustained influx of people and capital was laid long before modern population data was being tracked. Choices made generations ago shaped how each state would grow, where their major cities would emerge, and how quickly they could attract and hold new residents. Understanding why Oklahoma's growth has been consistently outpaced means stepping back into the period when its path and Texas's began to sharply diverge. How early settlement shaped future growth. In the early to mid-1800s, while European American settlers were pouring into Texas under land grant programs designed to spur migration and agricultural expansion, the area that would become Oklahoma was assigned a starkly different role. The U.S. federal government formally designated it as Indian Territory, a legal status intended to remove and relocate native nations from the southeastern United States and place them beyond what was then considered the edge of organized settlement. This was a deliberate policy choice, not an accident, and it set the region on a very different demographic and economic path from its southern neighbor. The Indian Territory designation dominated the region's population structure for decades. The Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole, along with numerous smaller tribes, were forced westward under removal policies. The 1830s Trail of Tears alone brought thousands into the territory via punishing marches over hundreds of miles, often at enormous loss of life. Communities had to rebuild from scratch in lands they had not chosen, under treaties that restricted their ability to sell land to non-native settlers. As a result, for most of the 19th century, the majority of people in the region's boundaries were indigenous, and the settlement pattern was shaped by collective land tenure and tribal governance rather than the rapid influx of dispersed homesteads seen elsewhere on the frontier. This legal and geographic separation had long consequences. In Texas, waves of newcomers from the American South and Europe in the mid-1800s quickly populated farming belts, ranch lands, and emerging towns. Places like Houston and Dallas were taking shape decades before Oklahoma opened to large-scale non-native settlement. By the 1870s, Dallas was already a regional rail hub connected to markets as far as St. Louis. Houston's coastal access gave it international trade capacity well before Oklahoma could match it. These early investments created a foundation for sustained growth, accumulating infrastructure, markets, and political influence that would keep drawing people and capital. By contrast, Indian Territory laws explicitly restricted non-native immigration for much of the century. Though a limited number of traders, missionaries, and railroad crews entered under special agreements, there was nothing like the broad homesteading push that had transformed parts of Texas since its days as a republic and then as a U.S. state. Without multiple clusters of towns developing side by side and linking to external markets, the territory lacked the density of trade networks other regions were building. Fewer commercial nodes meant fewer opportunities to channel goods long distances, open new industries, or attract major capital investment before the turn of the century. Change came only in the late 1800s. Beginning in 1889, a series of land runs opened portions of Indian Territory to non-native settlers willing to claim parcels under strict rules. Towns like Oklahoma City appeared in a matter of days during these events. Yet even with this sudden burst of activity, Texas's urban cores had already enjoyed a half-century head start in attracting investment and developing transportation networks. The disparity in timing meant that while Oklahoma was laying out streets and basic services, Dallas, Houston, and other Texas cities were expanding rail lines, warehouses, and deepwater port facilities that connected them to the wider national and global economy. That early lead shaped the economies each could build. Infrastructure follows established markets, and once ports, rail yards, and warehouses go up, they lower costs, attract industry, and encourage more people to arrive. Texas's corridors were in place, growing steadily, long before Oklahoma could compete for the same resources. Even after Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, it was still attempting to establish the kind of civic, commercial, and logistical systems that Texas had been refining for decades. Perception played its part as well. Throughout the 19th century, Texas was actively promoted, first by the Mexican government during its colonial period, then by state boosters, as a land of opportunity with organized communities, fertile land, and emerging transportation. Migrants from other states and abroad saw a network of growing towns and established social support systems. In contrast, Oklahoma's image was bound up with federal land releases and the relocation of native nations, attracting a different, often more risk-tolerant settler population seeking undeveloped claims rather than already functioning commercial centers. Within Indian Territory, the relocated tribes maintained their own schools, governance, and economies tied to their nations rather than to a wider state framework. These systems enabled resilience and self-determination, but did not align with the fast-paced city building occurring in Texas. When non-native settlement expanded, it had to integrate into a patchwork of established tribal jurisdictions with distinct political and economic priorities, rather than shape development on unclaimed land. Oklahoma's emergence as an oil state in the early 20th century offered a dramatic boost in economic potential. Cities like Tulsa grew rapidly on petroleum wealth, and new rail links helped move goods to other states. But Texas had oil too, and its cities were already positioned as hubs of corporate decision-making and energy distribution thanks to their existing transport links and broader industrial base. Houston's port and Dallas's rail connections allowed them to serve as headquarters for energy companies, while Oklahoma's oil towns frequently served as extraction sites for firms incorporated elsewhere. The flow of profits often bypassed local economies, reinforcing the gap in long-term growth trajectories. By the mid-20th century, Texas's denser web of infrastructure, anchored in cities with universities, research centers, and diverse industries, amplified its draw on workers and businesses. Such institutions generate their own gravitational pull, attracting the next wave of talent and capital in self-reinforcing cycles. Oklahoma's main cities were still expanding, but the delay in starting meant they were competing not on equal footing, but against entrenched metropolitan centers with decades of accumulated advantages. The legacy of Indian Territory status remains evident in the state's land patterns and governance. Dozens of federally recognized tribes maintain sovereignty today, shaping economic development and community life across much of Oklahoma. This is a distinctive aspect of the state's identity and history, but it also reflects how its formative years diverged from Texas's, both in who settled early and in the types of infrastructure and markets that developed. By the time Oklahoma was fully open to the kind of free land migration seen in much of Texas, the economic map of the region was already heavily set. Initial settlement patterns dictated where the first rail lines went, which towns got the earliest banks and warehouses, and which ports dominated trade. That early structure kept drawing more investment into Texas, while Oklahoma advanced more gradually in its own separate context. Those differences in timing and initial conditions shaped not just population totals, but the physical and economic networks that would support future growth. And while history built the foundation of that gap, other factors have reinforced it ever since, including some that can still be seen today in the way the two states connect to broader markets. Geography and access to markets. One major factor lies in the physical setting and how it shapes economic connections. Oklahoma's location gives it central proximity to much of the country, yet its position has not translated into the level of market integration seen just across the Red River. On paper, the state looks well placed. It sits at the meeting point of several interstate corridors, within a day's drive of major U.S. population centers, and with a varied landscape capable of supporting multiple industries. In practice, the way its geography interacts with transportation networks and trade infrastructure has kept it from matching the scale of Texas's growth. Oklahoma's terrain ranges from open prairie in the west to rolling woodlands in the east, with the Arkansas and Red Rivers among its main waterways. This diversity supports a mix of agriculture, energy production, and manufacturing. But unlike regions with direct deepwater access, Oklahoma's population and industry have not concentrated around a major coastal trade hub. While wheat, cattle, and energy products are important economic drivers, the physical distance between production sites and primary global export points adds time and costs to the movement of goods. Texas had a decisive early advantage: direct access to the Gulf of Mexico. Ports such as Houston, Corpus Christi, and Galveston create an integrated freight system linking rail, road, and sea transport in a single state. This makes it possible for energy, manufactured goods, and agricultural products to move from production to global markets without leaving Texas. That kind of integrated capacity, especially at the scale these ports handle, cannot be replicated inland. Oklahoma, by contrast, is inland and does not have direct deepwater port access. Its principal waterborne link is the McClellan-Kea Arkansas River navigation system, which connects the port of Catoosa near Tulsa to the Mississippi River and eventually the Gulf. While valuable, this inland port's capacity and speed are far below what Texas's Gulf facilities offer. It handles bulk commodities well, but it cannot match the frequency, vessel size, or cargo diversity of a major seaport. This shapes where companies choose to locate large-scale processing, warehousing, and shipping operations. The energy sector shows how these differences ripple outward. Oklahoma produces substantial crude oil and natural gas, but much of it moves south via pipelines to Texas refineries and export terminals. These facilities, and the corporate headquarters that oversee them, remain in Texas, concentrating high-value jobs and decision-making power there. The advantage compounds as service industries like finance, engineering, and logistics cluster around these hubs, reinforcing Texas's lead in economic activity tied to global energy flows. Agriculture follows a similar pattern. Oklahoma's farms supply beef, poultry, wheat, and soybeans in large volumes, but overseas exports typically require shipments through Texas or Louisiana ports. While rail and trucking routes are reliable, the extra steps involved add handling costs and time to market. Over time, this logistics structure has encouraged some agricultural processing to base itself closer to coastal facilities, even when the raw inputs originate in Oklahoma. Manufacturing outcomes mirror these patterns. Aerospace plants and component factories in Oklahoma City and Tulsa benefit from a skilled workforce and lower costs, but heavy manufacturing that depends on frequent import of materials and export of finished goods gravitates towards states with direct port access. Faster turnaround and reduced freight expenses strengthen the business case for locating production nearer to Gulf shipping lanes, leaving Oklahoma most competitive in industries where domestic trucking networks meet the needs of customers. Infrastructure design also reflects these geographic constraints. Texas's highway network is organized to feed ports and large metros with multiple high-capacity routes in all directions. Oklahoma's interstates, such as I-35, I-40, and I-44, connect efficiently to regional markets, but direct links to a global gateway are absent. A shipment from Oklahoma still requires a leg through another state to reach deepwater export, which limits the appeal for industries that rely on rapid international trade. Rail transport offers another comparison. While Oklahoma is served by major freight carriers, the largest rail, maritime interchanges are concentrated in Texas near port cities. Freight originating in Oklahoma often passes through Texas yards before loading onto ships, with much of the warehousing, customs processing, and associated employment occurring at those points rather than at the source. The economic spillover benefits of this pre-export activity accrue primarily to the regions handling the transfer, not the regions producing the goods. That's not to say Oklahoma's location offers no competitive advantages. The state's central position makes it ideal for domestic distribution hubs, and national retailers and logistics firms have placed fulfillment centers in the Oklahoma City metro for that reason. From there, trucks can reach a large percentage of the U.S. population within 2 days. This supports steady employment and regional investment, but domestic distribution alone does not create the same economic acceleration that comes from anchoring global trade routes. State leaders have worked to build on the assets available. Industrial parks near major interstates, expansion of the port of Catoosa, and business incentives have all targeted sectors that can operate successfully without direct port access. Still, the comparison to Texas remains stark. The Gulf port's ability to handle massive container ships, load diverse cargo types, and connect without intermediary steps gives them a reach and efficiency that inland facilities cannot match. For companies deciding where to concentrate operations, these logistical advantages often outweigh centrality. Even within Oklahoma's strongest sectors, geography often directs the highest value activities elsewhere. In energy, crude extracted in the state feeds refineries and petrochemical plants clustered along Texas's coast, where proximity to export terminals streamlines global sales. In agribusiness, processing plants near ports can get products onto ships hours after leaving the facility, reducing spoilage risk and tightening delivery windows. Over years, these patterns have guided more corporate investment, industry headquarters, and skilled jobs into Texas's metropolitan areas. The result is a structural difference in how each state connects to the broader market. Oklahoma can and does participate in national and global trade, but the trade flows frequently pass through Texas as the primary gateway. The infrastructure, labor market depth, and capital investment that accompany that role have been concentrated in Texas for decades. And once those foundations are in place, they are difficult to replicate or dislodge. Understanding this geographic and infrastructural divide helps explain why certain industries flourish in one state over the other. But physical location is only one piece. Other forces, policy decisions, investment patterns, and the paths industries followed after emerging have also shaped their very different growth stories. Economic development paths, two diverging stories. When large petroleum reserves were found in both Texas and Oklahoma in the early 20th century, it briefly appeared the two states might advance along similar economic tracks, at least in energy. By the 1920s, Tulsa had earned the title of oil capital of the world, with drilling, refining, and related services fueling rapid expansion. Entire districts grew up around oil wealth, and the industry became central to Oklahoma's identity. Yet over time, more of the financial, managerial, and corporate infrastructure that governed the energy sector gravitated to Texas, particularly to Houston, as major energy companies established their headquarters there. In Oklahoma, much of the activity remained in production and field operations rather than global decision-making centers. The concentration of headquarters in Texas brought more than executive offices. These centers drew high-value legal, financial, engineering, and technical jobs, supported a network of specialized service firms, and amplified the state's influence over industry policy and infrastructure. Oklahoma continued to benefit from oil revenues and operational employment, but the supporting ecosystem was smaller. The multiplier effect of corporate command centers, raising wages, attracting talent, and fostering service sector growth, was stronger in Texas. Historical patterns deepened this split. Oklahoma's economy was historically more energy-dependent, shaped by cycles of boom and bust tied to volatile oil and gas prices. Texas also experienced those cycles, but its largest cities developed additional hubs of growth: technology in Austin, medical and biomedical research in Houston, and corporate services in Dallas that spread risk and attracted varied investment. This early diversification gave Texas's urban economies greater resilience and more consistent in-migration, while Oklahoma's growth often rose or fell in closer step with energy prices. The pace of diversification was another dividing line. In the mid to late 20th century, Dallas built a strong base in finance and corporate management. Austin's emergence as a technology center accelerated in the 1980s and 1990s with the support of university research campuses and targeted state incentives. Houston leveraged its energy expertise into leadership in healthcare, becoming home to one of the largest medical complexes in the world. These industries produced high wages, steady growth, and reputational advantages that continued to draw companies and workers. Oklahoma's shift away from heavy reliance on oil and gas was slower and more concentrated in a few areas. Aerospace manufacturing in Tulsa and Oklahoma City's growing biosciences and distribution sectors expanded regional job opportunities, but these industries remained more limited in scale. The absence of multiple large, fast-growing sectors made it harder to buffer downturns in energy or to match the breadth of Texas's appeal to skilled workers from across the country. Patterns of corporate investment over the past 2 decades illustrate the gap. Texas's largest metros consistently rank among the top destinations for major corporate relocations, often involving large headquarters with long-term commitments and thousands of jobs. These moves reinforce local industry clusters, bolster tax revenues, and generate demand for office, housing, and infrastructure projects at substantial scales. In Oklahoma, recent economic development successes have focused more on small to mid-sized operations, regional logistics hubs, niche manufacturing facilities, or service centers. Such projects add important employment locally, but do not transform the broader state economy in the way a concentration of national or global headquarters can. Perception and professional networks influence these patterns. Texas cities that already host dense clusters of related companies, such as Houston's energy firms or Austin's technology ecosystem, become natural first choices for similar firms considering relocation or expansion. In Oklahoma, the strongest networks remain concentrated in oil, gas, and aerospace maintenance. Breaking into other sectors requires building new supply chains, expanding workforce training, and competing against metros where those ecosystems are already entrenched. State policy shapes the field of competition as well. Texas has pursued an aggressive, well-funded strategy to recruit targeted industries, partnering with local governments to offer incentives, invest in infrastructure, and support workforce pipelines. These moves have been linked to high-profile relocations that enhance the state's business-friendly reputation. Oklahoma offers incentives and has seen successes in attracting specific employers, but its smaller revenue base limits how many large projects it can pursue at once. The ability of Texas's largest metros to compete for multiple high-value deals simultaneously increases the odds of landing transformative investments year after year. By 2025, the cumulative effect of these choices and circumstances is evident in economic measures. Over the past decade, Texas's per capita GDP has grown significantly faster than Oklahoma's, not just due to its greater population, but because of the concentration of high-value sectors in its urban centers. Technology, healthcare, finance, and advanced manufacturing feed into sustained output growth, independent of energy cycles. Oklahoma has seen steady GDP gains, but its growth rate more closely tracks energy market performance. Aerospace, logistics, and manufacturing contribute to diversification, but the scale has not yet reached the point where downturns in oil and gas are fully offset. This leaves the state more exposed to global commodity shifts, with ripple effects on employment, tax revenues, and investment. Differences in wage distribution add another layer. High-paying roles in Texas's tech and finance sectors elevate the state's average earnings, contributing to higher per capita output. In Oklahoma, high wages are concentrated in fewer industries, and while cost-of-living advantages help households stretch income further, average earnings still trail the national mean, a long-standing pattern in the state's economy. Research and development funding further widens the gap. Texas's major university systems receive substantial R&D support, which fosters technology transfer, startups, and public-private partnerships. This continuous cycle drives new sector growth and keeps attracting younger, educated workers. Oklahoma's universities are leaders in certain areas, particularly petroleum engineering and meteorology, but their smaller research budgets limit the overall flow of commercialization and new business formation. Both states continue to draw strength from energy, but the role it plays differs. In Texas, it is one part of a diverse economic foundation. In Oklahoma, it remains one of the primary pillars, shaping investment decisions and labor market dynamics. For companies seeking stable, multifaceted markets, Texas offers greater balance. For individuals, it offers a wider spectrum of job types within the same state. The initial oil boom gave each state a powerful starting position. Over the following century, Texas channeled its energy wealth into building multiple high-growth sectors and attracting an ever broader set of industries. Oklahoma retained strong energy production and developed key regional strengths, but did not match the speed or scale of Texas's diversification. The difference shows in both structure and momentum. Texas's economic base is broader, its growth drivers more varied, and its largest cities better equipped to capture sustained inflows of capital and talent. This divergence in economic trajectories has implications beyond GDP figures. The industries a state cultivates shape the scale and pull of its population centers, influencing where people choose to live, work, and invest. Those dynamics are especially visible when comparing the metropolitan landscapes on either side of the Red River. The urban magnet effect. In recent decades, Texas's biggest cities have developed a powerful urban magnet effect, pulling in people, capital, and ideas at a scale that reinforces itself year after year. Today, 5 of the 15 fastest-growing metropolitan areas in the United States are in Texas: Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and a growing cluster in the Rio Grande Valley. Each of these metros attracts tens of thousands of new residents annually from other states and from abroad. These inflows don't just raise headcounts, they create dense, interconnected economies where opportunity breeds more opportunity. Urban magnetism works through more than just population numbers. It's about industry diversity, job market depth, and the concentration of institutions that keep economic activity circulating locally. In metropolitan Texas, the presence of corporate headquarters, research universities, medical centers, and varied manufacturing creates multiple routes to upward mobility. This diversity draws investment from venture capital firms, large banks, foreign investors, and national developers, fueling infrastructure growth, new housing, and expanding amenities, which then attract even more people. The cycle is straightforward. Size leads to diversity, diversity attracts investment, investment builds amenities, and amenities feed back into size. Austin provides a clear example of how this loop operates. Known initially for its cultural scene and universities, it became a major tech hub as startups took root, companies moved in, and research networks expanded. Its reputation as both a creative city and an innovation center now helps sustain its growth across sectors. On a smaller scale, Tulsa offers a different kind of magnetism. Through its Tulsa Remote program, the city provides financial incentives and community integration efforts to attract remote workers. While this approach operates at a far smaller scale than the Texan metros, it shows how targeted programs can bring in new residents and add energy to a local economy. Oklahoma's 2 main urban centers, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, have seen real gains in the past 2 decades. Oklahoma City has expanded residential options downtown, modernized public venues, and anchored growth in aerospace, energy, and distribution. Tulsa has invested in arts, public spaces, and niche programs like Tulsa Remote, which has drawn national attention. These moves have improved quality of life and made the cities more competitive within their region. Yet they remain overshadowed by the size, visibility, and connectivity of their Texas counterparts. Large companies evaluating the central and southern U.S. often start with the biggest economic hubs. Dallas, Fort Worth, with a metro population of about 7.9 million and a major international airport, is high on most lists. Houston's port access and global roles in energy and healthcare keep it firmly in the running for investment and relocation decisions. Oklahoma's metros offer advantages, but those advantages are more specialized and often require targeted incentives to compete for large-scale moves. Size alone shapes these outcomes. The combined populations of Oklahoma City and Tulsa are still millions short of Dallas, Fort Worth's total. Larger metros can sustain more specialized industries, from advanced data analytics to rare surgical specialties, simply because the market can support them. That range of opportunity often tips location decisions for workers choosing where to live and build careers. Education networks also factor into the pull. A metro like Dallas, Fort Worth includes several major research universities, robust community college systems, and trade schools, all tied into local industries through internships and hiring pipelines. While Oklahoma's institutions are strong in their fields, fewer total campuses and smaller research budgets mean a narrower range of academic and training opportunities, particularly in high-demand emerging fields. This can influence both students and faculty when choosing where to pursue studies or careers. Cultural activity amplifies the magnet effect. Large Texas metros host a constant stream of sports, concerts, conventions, and festivals, supported by substantial venues and tourism infrastructure. For many potential residents, especially young adults, these options are part of the overall value proposition of moving to a city. Oklahoma's cultural offerings are vibrant locally, especially in Tulsa's music scene and Oklahoma City's arts districts, but the overall variety and scale are naturally smaller. For employers trying to recruit from across the country, that difference can be part of the decision calculus. Connectivity is another driver. Dallas, Fort Worth International Airport provides non-stop access to major global business centers, and Houston's combined airport system offers similar reach. Austin and San Antonio maintain extensive domestic and international service. In contrast, Oklahoma City and Tulsa operate smaller but efficient regional airports with fewer direct international routes. For companies engaged in global trade or client travel, those added connections in Texas can be a deciding factor. Housing development also illustrates the scale difference. Texas's high-growth metros add thousands of new units annually, often building entirely new suburban cities complete with their own job bases, schools, and civic infrastructure. These suburban expansions extend the metro's reach to more residents without sacrificing access to jobs and amenities. In Oklahoma, suburban growth has been significant for the state, but volume remains smaller, and developers tend to pace projects more cautiously. That often means new amenities arrive more gradually. From an investment perspective, high and sustained growth in Texas metros offers more opportunities across multiple markets. Developers can commit to large office parks or extensive mixed-use projects with confidence in rapid absorption. In Oklahoma's metros, demand can be strong but is more measured, influencing the scale and speed of development. One well-placed question illustrates a real-life decision many people face. Would you move for a job if it meant giving up cheaper housing? This trade-off between cost of living and the breadth of career options is central to the magnet effect. For many, the latter is decisive, and the largest Texas metros can offer a broader, denser set of professional opportunities. Urban magnetism builds over decades, but once established, it's difficult to slow. Larger populations enable more specialized economies, attracting bigger investments, creating richer amenities, and pulling in still more people. Texas's top metros have been in this cycle for a long time, layering each new wave of growth onto a broad economic base. Oklahoma's cities are growing steadily with new strategies like Tulsa Remote and targeted sector investments. But in a region dominated by some of the country's most expansive urban economies, they face a constant challenge in matching that draw. This imbalance in attraction power sets the stage for a related trend, where the gravitational pull of larger metros doesn't just bring in newcomers, but also siphons off talent from smaller markets. That dynamic is particularly visible when looking at where young people from Oklahoma choose to study and work once they graduate. The Brain Drain Challenge. Each year, a substantial number of Oklahoma's high school graduates leave the state for college, specialized training, or immediate employment elsewhere. Some eventually return, but a significant fraction begin establishing long-term careers outside Oklahoma. Over time, this gradual outward flow of educated young adults has become widely recognized as the Brain Drain Challenge, an issue that affects not only individuals but the broader economic trajectory of the state. The core driver is opportunity density. In large Texas metros such as Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, or Austin, graduates in fields like tech, biomedical, finance, and specialized manufacturing can find substantially more openings at any given moment. The advantage goes beyond job counts. It includes the variety of roles, advancement tracks, and industry clusters available within a single metro area. A person starting in Austin's tech sector can shift from hardware engineering to software product management without moving cities, while equivalent moves in Oklahoma's markets might require relocation. That flexibility to grow a career in place is a significant draw for new graduates weighing where to begin. Pay structures reinforce the pull. Across many high-demand sectors, starting salaries in Texas's largest cities often run 10–20% higher than for similar positions in Oklahoma. In some specialized roles, such as cybersecurity or advanced data analytics, the gap is larger still. For younger workers focused on student loan repayment or building savings, gross pay and the prospect of higher future earning potential can outweigh local cost of living benefits. Even with more expensive housing in Texas, some view the faster career progression and higher early earnings as a clearer long-term advantage. The corporate landscape also matters. Oklahoma has strong employers in energy, aerospace, logistics, and manufacturing, but its roster of major headquarters remains smaller and more concentrated in a few sectors. Texas's metros, by contrast, host a deep mix of Fortune 500 and multinational headquarters across finance, energy, technology, retail, and healthcare. Large corporations often offer formal mentorship programs, structured advancement steps, and international project opportunities, elements that accelerate skill building and expand professional networks early in a career. Cultural and creative industries follow the same pattern. While Oklahoma City and Tulsa have built commendable arts and events calendars and support active local creative communities, the scale of opportunity in major cultural markets is broader. Dallas sustains a sizable advertising and design sector. Austin is known for its combined strengths in music, film, and technology, and Houston maintains nationally recognized arts organizations. For a new graduate in design, film production, or performance, access to more auditions, larger budgets, and broader collaboration pools can be decisive. Networks exert a quieter but potent influence. Once a few graduates from a particular department begin finding success in a given city, younger students see that city as a proven path. This creates organic pipelines out of Oklahoma's universities toward established destinations, often reinforced by recruiters from large Texas-based employers who regularly visit Oklahoma campuses. Students can graduate with more exposure to out-of-state opportunities than to equivalent local ones, shaping where they send applications before they leave school. The rise of remote work initially looked like a potential counterweight, promising that graduates could remain in Oklahoma while working for national or global firms. In practice, many remote or hybrid positions still require proximity to major corporate locations for periodic meetings or on-site work. Young professionals also often seek the in-person interactions and networking potential that come from working in an industry hub. For them, living in a city with a critical mass of peers and employers remains a professional advantage. Research and development capacity is another fork in the road. Texas maintains multiple major research universities and medical centers that train advanced degree candidates and offer extensive partnerships with private industry. Oklahoma has competitive strengths in petroleum engineering, weather science, and aviation, but its smaller scale limits the number of high-profile research positions available relative to its annual output of STEM graduates. For those seeking cutting-edge lab work or multidisciplinary teams, Texas's institutions can offer greater variety and funding. These shifts are not without consequence for Oklahoma's broader economy. A sustained outflow of highly educated young adults narrows the local talent pool available for expansion in knowledge-intensive industries. Employers evaluating new sites often consider whether they can reliably fill specialized roles locally. If the local labor pool is perceived as too thin, companies may set up their operations where the needed talent already concentrates, often in those same Texas metros that draw Oklahoma graduates. Labor availability is a central consideration in corporate site selection. Texas's ability to retain its own graduates while attracting skilled workers from other states and abroad has created a self-reinforcing cycle of corporate and population growth. Oklahoma's smaller gains in this area mean it often needs to import experienced talent, adding recruitment and relocation costs for employers. Meanwhile, a new graduating cohort may be preparing to follow well-worn paths southward to metros that appear to offer more momentum. Longitudinal alumni surveys from Oklahoma's major universities capture the effect. In certain programs, like computer science, engineering, or digital media, more than a third of graduates report Texas addresses within 5 years of completing their studies, with other notable draws including Colorado and California. These proportions vary by field, but consistently show Texas as the largest single out-of-state destination for recent alumni. However, this pattern has seen nuance in recent years. While Oklahoma lost graduates during much of the 2010s, the pandemic era, 2020-2023, brought an unusual reversal. Kansas City Fed data noted historic surges of domestic immigration, including roughly 27,000 net immigrants in 2022 and about 23,000 in 2023. Much of that growth included working-age adults, and in some recent years, the state posted a modest brain gain, with net inflows of residents holding at least a bachelor's degree. This does not erase the cumulative losses over decades, but it suggests targeted opportunity and lifestyle advantages can attract educated newcomers under the right conditions. Policy efforts have tried to build on such momentum. Programs highlighted in the Oklahoma Work Trends research point to workforce training, aligned to employer needs and encouragement of flexible work arrangements as tools to keep educated workers in the state. Additionally, some scholarship packages now carry in-state work commitments after graduation, and internship networks tie students to local employers before they finish their degrees. These can help reframe Oklahoma cities as places where skilled graduates can both launch and grow careers. Still, the underlying structural challenge remains. Larger, more diverse job markets across the border offer higher perceived upside, and they compete directly for Oklahoma's top graduates. Career decisions at age 22 are shaped heavily by immediate opportunities, visible mentors, and peer networks. And on these fronts, Texas metros hold advantages that compound over time. For Oklahoma, the stakes in addressing brain drain are high. Retaining a larger share of educated young adults could broaden the talent base needed to attract new industries, increase entrepreneurship, and deepen innovation capacity. Without such retention, the cycle of outflow risks continuing, even with periodic reversals. Every graduate who opts to build their career locally adds not just one worker, but another link in the professional networks that can make Oklahoma's metros more competitive in the future. The decision to leave or stay balances multiple factors: career potential, wages, community, and lifestyle. In that mix, one consideration often highlighted in Oklahoma's favor is cost of living, especially housing affordability. Yet even with that advantage, it remains to be seen whether lower expenses alone can counter the gravitational pull of bigger, more diversified economies nearby. Cost of living, an advantage that isn't enough. One of Oklahoma's most consistent selling points is its low cost of living, particularly in housing. Multiple cost of living indexes, including Best Places, Numbeo, and Expatistan, show Oklahoma City and Tulsa well below the national average and far below major Texas metros for both housing and everyday expenses. Median home values in 2025 are a fraction of those found in Austin or Dallas. Property taxes are generally lower, and rents remain comparatively modest. Even in walkable neighborhoods near downtown, monthly rents often undercut the rates in Texas's largest cities by a wide margin. For households facing steep housing costs elsewhere, those numbers can be appealing. Outside of housing, daily expenses in Oklahoma often run lower as well. Groceries, utilities, transportation, and healthcare tend to cost noticeably less than in Austin, Houston, or Dallas, creating the picture of a place where the same paycheck stretches further. For retirees on fixed incomes, remote workers who can live anywhere, or families intent on controlling monthly costs, those figures suggest the possibility of more space, reduced overhead, and less financial strain. On paper, it looks like a strong case for relocation. But migration trends don't align perfectly with those cost advantages. Despite the gap in living expenses, Texas's largest metros are still drawing more new residents than Oklahoma's smaller cities. The underlying reason is that affordability is weighed alongside other critical factors: job diversity, career advancement, education options, healthcare access, cultural life, and transportation networks. For many who are mobile and early in their careers, those other categories outweigh the savings on a mortgage or rent payment. The trade-off can be illustrated simply. A software engineer looking at relocation might find that an Austin position pays materially more than a comparable role in Oklahoma City, even after adjusting for higher rent. In Austin, the tight concentration of tech companies, startups, and research organizations offers multiple pathways to shift roles and advance without changing cities. In Oklahoma, moving on from one specialized job could mean having to relocate again to find a suitable next position. When that constraint is factored in, higher pay in a costlier market can still feel like the better long-term choice. Texas's high-growth metros also justify their costs in ways that extend beyond paychecks. Large-scale cultural venues, sports teams, convention centers, and an almost constant roster of festivals and events give residents more activities to choose from year-round. Oklahoma City and Tulsa have invested heavily in improving their cultural and entertainment districts, but population scale limits how many venues, teams, or touring acts can be supported at any given time. For many potential movers, the smaller set of options diminishes the perceived value of local affordability. Access to jobs and amenities in relation to housing location is another element of the equation. Oklahoma's lighter traffic and shorter commutes are advantages, but many of the best-paying roles or more specialized services are concentrated in core city areas. Affordable suburban neighborhoods can mean longer drives for work or entertainment. In Texas, heavy demand has fueled substantial suburban job growth, with new mixed-use districts, corporate campuses, and cultural hubs built closer to where people live. Oklahoma's suburbs have grown too, but often without the same scale of local employment and entertainment, so trips into the city remain more common. Healthcare and education influence cost of living decisions as well. While Oklahoma's network of hospitals and clinics meets most needs, the largest clusters of specialized research hospitals and advanced treatment facilities are found in Texas's major metros. Families with children also weigh the range of school choices. Larger populations support a broader mix of public school programs, private institutions, and extracurricular options. Even for households without current healthcare or school needs, these factors shape perceptions about long-term living quality. National visibility plays a role in migration choices. Texas suburbs frequently feature in widely circulated, fastest-growing cities lists or best places to live rankings. That sort of media attention effectively advertises them to people planning a move. By comparison, suburban communities like Moore, Edmond, or Broken Arrow, despite competitive housing prices and local amenities, rarely appear in those rankings. Without the external spotlight, they don't attract the same out-of-state interest as similarly affordable areas in Texas, such as Leander or Pearland. Perception also matters in how low costs are interpreted. Affordable housing can be taken as a sign of manageable expenses and a good quality of life, but to some, it suggests slower economic growth or a limited job market. In contrast, higher housing costs often project an image of dynamic growth and abundant opportunity, whether or not that is the complete reality. Across the Sun Belt, buying into a pricier market is sometimes seen as investing in a rising area. a narrative that tends to work against more affordable markets that lack strong national branding. Still, Oklahoma's cost structure does retain and attract certain groups: retirees, public sector employees, and remote workers in stable positions often value budget certainty over rapid career climbing. For these residents, lower housing and daily expenses are direct and tangible benefits. Local economic development leaders have tried to capitalize on that appeal by tying affordable living to new or expanding employment opportunities. Recent recruitment efforts aim to connect affordability with higher-wage, diverse employment. Cities have targeted employers in sectors such as aerospace design, logistics technology, and advanced manufacturing, with the logic that if residents can access competitive roles locally, the cost advantage becomes more decisive. There have been wins at the city and regional level, yet on a broader scale, Texas's metros, with their dense industry networks and aggressive recruitment strategies, keep securing more of the high-skill relocations from other states. The migration gap in 2025 between affordable Oklahoma suburbs and their higher-cost Texas equivalents underscores the basic point. Cost matters, but it's not decisive on its own. For many movers, especially younger, well-educated workers with mobility, the richer job markets, larger professional networks, and wider amenity set of Texas metros carry greater weight than lower monthly expenses. In competitive relocation decisions, Oklahoma's advantage in living costs is one lever among many, and it must be paired with compelling opportunities to match the draw of more expensive markets. Affordability remains an important part of the state's appeal and a foundation on which it can continue to build. But location choices are shaped by more than economics alone, and other factors, particularly environmental and safety considerations, also influence where people decide to settle. These considerations can shift perceptions just as strongly as job prospects or housing prices, and they form another key piece of the broader migration story. Climate and risk perception. Oklahoma lies within the high-frequency tornado corridor known as Tornado Alley, where warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico meets cooler, drier systems from the north and west. This convergence produces some of the most volatile thunderstorm conditions in North America, and that association shapes how outsiders think about the state. In recent decades, events such as powerful tornadoes hitting populated areas, late-season ice storms disrupting transport and utilities, and prolonged droughts affecting both farms and city water supplies have reinforced this image. While residents learn to live with these patterns, people considering a move from out of state often weigh such risks closely, and perception can play as decisive a role as the actual statistical likelihood of severe weather. For families planning relocations, climate risk enters the conversation alongside jobs, housing, and schools. Direct tornado strikes remain rare when measured against the size of the state, but the mental picture of sirens, damaged homes, or days without power can deter interest. Entire neighborhoods can go years without a major event, yet Oklahoma still ranks among the highest states in annual tornado frequency. By comparison, in Texas, while tornadoes occur, particularly in the north, the state's sheer size offers options. Someone committed to moving for work can choose metro areas in central or southern Texas, where twister risk is substantially lower, without giving up proximity to large job markets. Oklahoma's winters bring their own challenges. Ice storms can topple power lines, close highways, and leave homes without heat for days. For people from climates where winter is mostly wet or mild, the idea of roads sheathed in ice or infrastructure stressed by freezing conditions is off-putting. In Texas, certain regions rarely see ice at all. Coastal metros like Houston or Brownsville avoid the cold weather hazards altogether, though they face hurricane risks that create their own planning and insurance challenges. Periods of severe drought add another layer to Oklahoma's climate profile. Water shortages affect crop yields and, in dry years, can lead to municipal restrictions. While Texas also wrestles with drought, some of its metros benefit from more extensive water infrastructure and greater regional variability in rainfall, allowing parts of the state to balance shortfalls better. For manufacturers, food processors, or any other water-intensive sector, the capacity to guarantee supply year-round is a factor in location decisions. These weather risks translate into costs for households. Homeowner insurance premiums in storm-prone areas are often higher because of wind, hail, and flood coverage. In Oklahoma, where these hazards occur more frequently over a large portion of the state, insurers adjust rates accordingly. Even without exact figures, the effect is clear. Premiums in certain zip codes can erode much of the monthly savings that lower home prices provide compared to other states. In Texas, residents in hurricane-exposed coastal areas see similar surcharges, but those living in inland metros, such as Austin or San Antonio, often face lower baseline rates for wind or hail than homeowners in Oklahoma City or Tulsa. Infrastructure resilience does help mitigate risk, but scale matters. Oklahoma's utilities and cities have upgraded grids, hardened public buildings, and improved response systems after major events. However, the redundancy possible in larger metros, multiple hospitals, alternative transportation corridors, extensive utility interconnections, allows for quicker recovery in places like Dallas, Fort Worth, or Houston. Smaller systems, even well-maintained, can take longer to restore after wide area impacts. For people unfamiliar with the state, perception can outweigh raw probability. A statistical table might show only modest differences in annual damage risk between Oklahoma City and Austin, yet repeated national coverage of Oklahoma's most destructive weather cements a stronger link in the public mind. Every high-profile tornado season revives the narrative, making it harder for relocation marketing to shift attention toward Oklahoma's affordability or business climate. Texas's hazards follow their own pattern. Extreme summer heat is common in much of the state, with extended runs of triple-digit days in July and August. For some, living with that heat is undesirable. Yet job growth in metros like Austin and Dallas, Fort Worth, keeps populations climbing there, helped by infrastructure adapted to these temperatures and a concentration of employers that can offset discomfort with opportunity. Hurricanes also pose real risks along the Gulf Coast. Storms can cause widespread flooding, property loss, and power outages. But Houston and other coastal cities maintain strong recovery capacities through their size, economies, and transport connections. Further inland, cities are far less exposed to hurricane damage, giving movers climate-diversified choices within the same state that Oklahoma cannot easily replicate. Certain industries are especially sensitive to climate stability. Data centers, high-tech fabrication plants, and logistics hubs often seek to minimize potential downtime from extreme weather. Concerns over ice accumulation on lines, short-notice tornado warnings, or long droughts can tip site selection toward areas with milder extremes. In Texas, the ability to place such facilities in distinct climate zones, as far from hurricanes as possible while avoiding Tornado Alley's highest frequency areas, gives its recruiters a talking point Oklahoma cannot match at scale. Homebuilders and developers respond to these same perceptions. In Texas, master plan communities can rise in areas marketed as lower risk within the state's hazard profile, appealing to in-state and out-of-state buyers alike. In Oklahoma, marketing often highlights whether resilient construction, storm shelters, and preparedness plans. While reassuring locally, these measures may not fully persuade newcomers comparing locations across state lines, especially if they can find similar homes where perceived risk is lower. Adding to this challenge, many property search tools now show hazard scores alongside price and school ratings. A buyer browsing from another state may see red or orange indicators for wind and hail in much of Oklahoma, while an inland Texas home might score lower on those particular hazards. Visibility at this level makes it harder for climate considerations to be overlooked, reinforcing long-held impressions about each state's weather profile. Despite these drawbacks, Oklahoma does attract new residents who accept its climate trade-offs. Some relocators weigh the lower cost of living, smaller city pace, and community factors more heavily than weather concerns. Others adjust by moving to neighborhoods they believe are less exposed or by investing in personal protective features like home generators. Yet under broader regional competition for people and investment, Texas's ability to couple major economic hubs with internal geographic variety gives it another comparative edge. Movers can find climates that fit their risk comfort without giving up the benefits of large-scale metro economies. Climate and risk perception are not the only forces shaping these decisions, but they do factor into how people sort potential destinations. They work in tandem with cost, infrastructure, opportunity, and a range of less tangible qualities that can sway a final choice. Those less tangible qualities can be just as powerful in influencing where people see themselves living, and they operate on a different part of the decision-making spectrum. Cultural and lifestyle perceptions. When people choose where to live, the day-to-day feel of a place can matter as much as measurable factors like housing prices or job counts. Culture, entertainment, and lifestyle shape how easily someone can picture themselves fitting in and feeling at home. These elements are harder to quantify than wage data or growth rates, yet they can tip decisions, especially when comparing destinations with otherwise similar economic profiles. On this front, Texas's largest metros project identities that draw broad attention, while Oklahoma's cities offer a more contained pace of life that resonates with some but appeals less widely. One clear contrast is Austin's dual role as both a live music capital and a growing tech hub, combining nightlife, creative energy, and high-skilled job opportunities in one place. This blend of entertainment and industry has built an image that keeps attracting new residents who want both career momentum and a vibrant social environment. Tulsa, by comparison, has undergone a quieter arts revival. Investments in its historic districts, public spaces, and arts infrastructure, well documented in recent coverage of the city's cultural plans, have drawn new creative talent and bolstered its music and arts scene. The scale is smaller than Austin's, but for some, that more intimate environment is part of its appeal. Food culture offers another telling example. Houston's dining landscape reflects decades of immigration, with options spanning dozens of cultural traditions and creating one of the broadest ranges of cuisine in the United States. For newcomers, that variety can make a city feel immediately global and accessible. In Oklahoma, local and regional flavors dominate. Barbecue, comfort food, and regional specialties are mainstays in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa. The depth of local tradition is strong, and standout venues earn loyal followings, but the breadth of international options is narrower. For some movers, that distinction can influence how they imagine their everyday life. Large-scale events and professional sports are a further point of separation. Texas metros support multiple major league teams and host recurring high-attendance events that shape city identity and national perception. That variety keeps large public gatherings in constant rotation. Oklahoma City's NBA franchise has boosted the local sports profile, and college football remains a major cultural anchor statewide, but the overall range of professional leagues and large, recurring events is more limited. This difference not only affects entertainment choices, but also influences a city's visibility in national media. These cultural patterns influence how cities market themselves. Texas metros benefit from reputations built over decades. Austin's weird, creative brand paired with tech growth, Houston's global identity anchored by diversity, Dallas's corporate hub status and arts district profile. Oklahoma's cities have been crafting their own narratives. Tulsa with its Art Deco heritage and rejuvenated downtown, Oklahoma City with its blend of Western history and modern development. But these newer brands are still gaining recognition beyond the region. That recognition gap matters because first impressions often form before someone starts comparing job offers or housing prices. Tulsa's revitalization is a notable example of how targeted investment can shift perceptions. Redevelopment of the Arts District, the Gathering Place Park project, and ongoing support for local music have made the city more competitive in attracting remote workers and creatives. These moves have generated measurable increases in tourism and cultural participation, yet they operate within a smaller metro context, meaning the national spotlight is brighter on Texas's larger, more event-heavy cities. Nightlife fits the same pattern of scale and variety. Austin's entertainment districts draw locals and visitors nearly every night of the week, with a dense mix of venues. Dallas offers multiple zones where dining, live entertainment, and sports blend in ways that keep activity high. Oklahoma City and Tulsa have built lively downtown and midtown areas with restaurants, breweries, and music spots that meet local demand, but weekday crowds are thinner and the choice is fewer. For young professionals deciding where to build a social network that can weigh in favor of bigger metros. Perceptions of diversity also contribute indirectly to lifestyle appeal. Large metro areas in Texas tend to offer more chances to participate in cultural traditions from around the world, language-specific media, festivals rooted in immigrant communities, and networks that make relocation feel less isolating. Oklahoma's urban areas have become more diverse over the past generation, but smaller immigrant populations mean these cultural touchpoints are less concentrated, so they're less likely to form a prominent part of the city's image to outsiders. Marketing reach compounds all these differences. Major Texas events are regularly covered by national outlets or trend across social media, introducing the cities to audiences who may never have visited. Oklahoma's events tend to reach potential newcomers through targeted promotion rather than constant media presence. That's not a reflection on event quality, but on population scale and the national networks available to amplify them. For someone weighing relocation, the comparison can come down to what kind of cultural environment they want to step into immediately upon arrival. In bigger metros, there's a high likelihood that any given weekend offers multiple large-scale concerts, markets, festivals, or games to attend spontaneously. In smaller ones, marquee events are spaced further apart, and residents may plan their year around a few regional highlights. Some people prefer the rhythm and manageability of that pace. Others view it as a step back from what they're used to. The draw of cultural life is ultimately subjective. A smaller-scale art scene can feel more personal, and a mostly local food culture can provide a stronger sense of place. Crowds, traffic, and constant activity in larger metros aren't universally appealing, even if they make for better national branding. This is why some movers choose Oklahoma deliberately for its scale and atmosphere, and why others continue to lean toward larger cities despite higher costs. Which matters more to you when moving, culture or salary? These soft factors don't just shape satisfaction after a move, they influence initial interest in the first place. Places that repeatedly appear in national conversations about music, food, events, or sports enter relocation lists more often, giving them a constant edge in attracting talent. Places that stay off those lists may have to work harder to make their case, even when offering affordability, safety, or other tangible benefits. The question for state and city leaders is how to use these cultural and lifestyle perceptions to strengthen overall competitiveness. Doing so effectively doesn't require matching the scale of larger metros, but it does mean identifying distinct strengths that resonate more broadly with people making relocation choices. The choices Oklahoma makes in that direction will help shape whether it can expand its share of new residents in the years ahead. And that leads to a larger consideration. What would it take for the state to significantly narrow the economic and population gap with its southern neighbor by the middle of this century? Opportunities for Oklahoma's future. For Oklahoma, the path forward depends less on matching another state's pace and more on building steadily in the areas where it already holds a competitive position. Three sectors offer the clearest near-term growth potential: renewable energy, particularly wind, aerospace and aerospace maintenance, and logistics and distribution. Each already operates at a meaningful scale in the state and could expand further with sustained focus. The wind energy base is already substantial. Large projects in western Oklahoma take advantage of consistent wind patterns and open land, producing more power in certain seasons than the state consumes. This surplus positions Oklahoma as an exporter of renewable electricity to neighboring markets, and the expertise developed in siting, building, and maintaining wind farms could support related manufacturing, such as turbine component fabrication. With global demand for renewable infrastructure rising and supply chains still diversifying, the state has a realistic opportunity to capture a share of that growth if it maintains supportive policies and recruits relevant suppliers. Aerospace and maintenance are another built-in advantage. Oklahoma has decades of experience tied to military and civilian aviation support, anchored by facilities like Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. That installation has fostered a highly skilled workforce in aircraft maintenance, repair, and overhaul, a resource that private aerospace firms value. Boeing, American Airlines, and a range of supply and repair companies already operate in the state, with sites in places like Tulsa benefiting from proximity to both manufacturing capacity and regional transport links. Expanding this cluster by recruiting new suppliers, training programs, and defense-adjacent contractors could add stable, high-skilled jobs with long-term staying power. In logistics and distribution, Oklahoma's geographic position is a direct asset. At the crossroads of Interstates 35, 40, and 44, and served by major freight rail lines, the state offers efficient links in all directions. From Oklahoma City, trucks can reach a large share of the U.S. population within 2 days, a fact that matters to e-commerce and retail fulfillment operations. Several national retailers already operate distribution centers in the state, citing moderate labor costs and less congestion than in larger metros. By highlighting those advantages, Oklahoma could recruit more regional headquarters or value-added operations tied to logistics, such as packaging and light assembly. Turning these sector strengths into sustained growth will require coordination between industry, educators, and policymakers. Research from Oklahoma Work Trends shows that many employers are already emphasizing retention strategies and flexible work arrangements, while the state has active workforce training programs aimed at aligning skills pipelines with industry demand. Building on these efforts, particularly in aerospace technology, renewable energy systems, and logistics management, can help connect graduates and mid-career workers directly to the industries most likely to expand. Workforce alignment is critical. Oklahoma's universities and technical schools can shorten the gap between training and employment by embedding industry-specific tracks into degree and certification programs. For example, aviation maintenance students could gain direct workplace experience through partnerships with aerospace firms, while wind energy technicians could train on equipment from active projects. Making employers visible on campus and ensuring students can see clear local career paths has the potential to reduce outflow of graduates to other states. Urban livability will also influence whether those workers stay. Employers compete not just on salaries, but on how appealing a city is to live in over the long term. Continued investment in housing diversity, transit, parks, and cultural life in metro areas like Oklahoma City and Tulsa can make offers from Oklahoma-based firms more competitive against similar roles in larger metros. The decision to remain in state often involves evaluating day-to-day amenities as much as wage scales, so visible improvements in public spaces and services can directly support retention. Brand recognition is another lever. Outside investors and potential residents often have limited familiarity with Oklahoma's current strengths. Broadening awareness through targeted promotion, highlighting successful renewable projects, established aerospace hubs, and its central location for logistics could reposition the state as an active, growing player in the region. Texas benefits from near-constant national business coverage. Oklahoma's best chance to appear in those same conversations is through consistent, well-placed stories about economic successes and quality of life upgrades. Public-private partnerships can extend the reach of these strategies. Coordinated efforts that bring together local governments, educational institutions, and industry can present a unified case to external audiences and make in-state operations more efficient. Shared training facilities, joint recruitment campaigns, and infrastructure improvements timed with industry expansions can lower costs, shorten timelines, and make the state more attractive to incoming firms. Measurable success should be defined in realistic terms. Overtaking Texas in population or total GDP is outside the scope of what the next 2 decades can deliver, but consistent sector diversification, improving graduate retention, and steady gains in per capita GDP are achievable benchmarks. Clear progress in these areas would strengthen Oklahoma's economic foundation and reputation, reducing its reliance on a narrow set of industries and making cycles of migration more favorable over time. Focusing on renewable energy, aerospace and maintenance, and logistics gives Oklahoma targets well matched to its current assets and market opportunities. These industries have built-in demand, potential for value-added spin-offs, and an existing base to scale from. The task is matching them with ongoing workforce development, incentives that reward sustained job creation, and urban investments that make the state's largest metros more attractive to both companies and residents. For policymakers and business leaders, the challenge is execution over many years without diluting effort. Retaining momentum in all 3 target industries will require continuous adaptation to market shifts, willingness to court new players, and a clear message about Oklahoma's strengths. Residents and civic leaders will likewise play a role in shaping cities that appeal not only to those who grew up locally, but to newcomers who can choose from markets across the country. If the state can achieve that alignment, it stands to gain more than just jobs. A more balanced economy can help stabilize revenues, hedge against downturns in any one sector, and create a self-reinforcing cycle of opportunity that keeps more people and their skills close to home. The benefits would ripple into housing demand, local entrepreneurship, and cultural life, strengthening both the economy and the communities it supports. The areas most likely to shift outcomes in Oklahoma's favor are clear. Build and maintain strong workforce pipelines connected directly to growth industries. Offer targeted incentives and support for research and development in sectors where the state is already competitive, and invest steadily in urban livability so that people choose to stay once they arrive. Together, these priorities provide a practical framework for long-term, sustainable growth, one shaped by the state's assets, its market position, and its willingness to plan beyond short-term gains. How well those priorities are pursued will influence more than just future economic charts. They will signal the kind of opportunities available to the next generation, and in doing so, they will shape where people decide to live, work, and build their futures. The differences between Oklahoma and Texas go beyond population size, reflecting how history, geography, infrastructure, and economic choices have shaped their present trajectories. Large, diverse economies tend to attract people and investment, reinforcing their position over time. Closing more of the gap will require deliberate focus. First, strengthen workforce retention and training connected directly to renewable energy, aerospace, and logistics. Second, secure more high-value corporate roles and R&D operations through targeted incentives and partnerships. Third, invest in urban amenities and resilience to narrow perception gaps. Programs like Tulsa Remote show progress is possible. Which of those 3 would you prioritize for Oklahoma? Tell us in the comments.